Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and today we're back for another Sunday sew along. We finished our V8772 sew along last week. So this week we have a little bit of a tutorial for you and I'm going to be talking about pleather, sewing with leather or pleather. And then next week we will be starting our V1650, which is the trench coat pattern. We'll be starting all of that, talking supplies and fitting and all that kind of stuff next week. So that's what we have going forward. But yes, today I have made, I made a pair of pleather pants, faux leather, back a few weeks ago now. And then I also made this moto jacket that I'm getting ready to show you. And I just thought it might be nice to have, I get questions all the time on sewing with leather and pleather. They're treated basically the same way when you're sewing. So I thought I would show you number one. I also get a lot of questions about cutting out and how I cut things out and if I can show that a little bit more. So I am going to insert a video here in just a minute on how I cut out my pieces for this jacket. So I have made Vogue 1714, I think that's the right number, I'll pop a picture here. And I was using this wonderful pleather from, it's a Lady McElroy pleather in Spice Orange, I think is what it's called, from Minerva. And this was part of the Minerva Makers Ambassador team, brand ambassadors. The Minerva were called brand ambassadors now, so the Minerva brand ambassadors. So I was gifted the fabric. I had 3 meters of it and used almost all of it actually for this pattern, and I'll tell you why, even though that's more fabric than what was, I have some left. I have probably half of a meter left in scraps, but I will explain why here in just a second. Okay, so let's talk about tips for sewing with pleather, and then I'll show you, then we'll go to the cutting out video, and then I'll show you the finished jacket. So I'll put a timestamp here if you just want to see the finished jacket of when that happens. All right, so sewing with pleather, not hard. It really, the only difference between sewing with it and sewing with any other fabric is that, number one, it's not forgiving. So once you have sewn a seam, you have perforated the fabric, and actually, sometimes leather, you can almost get it to go away in spots, possibly. Pleather, pretty much a hole is a hole. You can't make it go away. So you do need to be careful even re-sewing seams. I had to do that a couple times on this jacket. You just have to be careful because it will perforate the fabric and make a very weak point where it could then rip. Also, you cannot press pleather. Now, there were a few areas where I put a press cloth in between. I have a Teflon foot on my iron, so I can usually iron a lot of things, but not the pleather. So I put in silk organza press cloth between my iron and the pleather just a couple of times, just to kind of get things to lie the way I wanted them to. That worked fine. So definitely test on a scrap when it comes to heat. Now, a lot of times leather will take the heat just fine. You'll have to use a press cloth, number one, just so that your iron isn't like sticking, because it will stick on the hide. But yeah, I mean, it's skin. It takes fine to heat, water, all the above. Anything the cow would have been near. So anyway, just keep that in mind. Let's see. When it comes to actually sewing, I use on my machine, and I know a lot of people with home machines as well. Obviously, leather and pleather come in different thicknesses. The lighter weight, probably the easier to sew. This one was a little bit heavier weight, and I'll get more into the project a little bit. It kind of came out not like I was expecting, which is always kind of fun. But I use a Teflon foot. It looks just like a regular sewing foot. It's just the foot part is not made out of metal. It's made out of Teflon, so it's made out of a plastic, which means it glides over the pleather, and a regular metal foot will catch, like it doesn't slide through easily, if that makes sense, which makes feeding it through really, really difficult. So yes, highly recommend this. Now, when I'm sewing leather or pleather on my home machine, I do have a Teflon foot for that machine, but I have found a walking foot works way easier and way better. So I would recommend a walking foot for, a regular home machine. I don't have a walking foot for my industrial machine, but the Teflon foot works fine on that. So this just has feed dogs on the top here, just like it does on the bottom, so it feeds everything through evenly. And this is definitely my recommended foot for my home machine. You'll also sometimes see a roller foot that has like a little wheel on it almost that helps feed things through. I've never used one of those, but they could probably, I would think that they sell them, so obviously they work. But yeah, the Teflon foot for my industrial machine, walking foot. The walking foot for my home machine, I use it all the time. It's a good one. You should have one. I know quilters use it a lot, but you should have one. Okay, so, you know, you have to be careful, you know, unpicking seams, all of that kind of stuff, because, you know, once you have a hole, you have a hole. So the thought would be you can't pin things, right? Now, I use just regular binder clips, but they make, you know, the Wonder clips and all that kind of stuff to clip your layers together. I know a lot of people love those Wonder clips. I've just never owned any. So I can't speak to that, but I do know a lot of people that really love those Wonder clips. But to be honest, I pin in the seam allowances on occasion, especially like on the sleeve and stuff when I'm trying to match up notches and certain seams with certain places. I just pinned within the seam allowance. Now those pins, once I've used them, are pretty much shot, but yeah, I do. I use pins. And the reason I do, the very first time I made a leather jacket, I was on my sewing retreat with my professional sewing group, and my mentor Joyce was there. I've talked about her before on the channel. And I was trying to get this sleeve into this leather jacket, and you know, I was trying to like ease it in with my fingers and putting in the clips and trying to do everything. And she grabbed it from me and she was like, oh, for heaven's sake, and grabbed the pins and started pinning it. I was like, oh my gosh, you're pinning the leather. And she's like, I'm in the seam allowance, you're fine. And that's the one thing I loved. She, you know, she'd been sewing for so long, there's just no fear. You know, that's the kind of person you need to take the wheel. That's whose feet I learned at right there. But yeah, I did. I used pins on occasion. So there's that. Now another thing, let me set this stuff over here. Another thing that I found to be very helpful, especially with this project, is any kind of fusible like sticky tapes, like double stick tapes. Like Wonder Tape is fantastic, a double stick tape, and then also the double-sided fusible stay tape from Sokeezy. I use this on my knits all the time. This actually worked really, really well in a couple of places for this jacket. So I also use this on my pleather pants for the hem, especially with the hem, because you can't pin that because that's going through like layers, and that's also, you can't really clip that. So this, yeah, with my pleather pants, they had a 2-inch hem, and that can get hard. So this stuff works great. And I know that they make like leather tape, that I think they call it, which is basically double stick tape that just, you know, puts things in place and then it sticks, glues it basically. I know people use rubber cement as well for their leather bags and that kind of thing to get things to stay while they're sewing. But yes, there you have it. Those are just some tips, some things that make sewing with leather and pleather a little bit easier. Now, well, I'll talk about more tips with the jacket when we come back. I'm going to take you now to the cutting table and show you how I cut out my pleather. Okay, so I always get a lot of questions, people asking if they can see me cut things out. So we will do this as part of this video. So I've got my pleather here. This would work for leather as well. Obviously pleather is going to be more uniform because it's actual yardage, whereas leather will be oddly shaped because it's come off an animal. So I have this single layer. It doesn't really matter. You can cut out right side up or wrong side up. It is completely up to you. Obviously, if your pleather has some sort of a design or something, you probably want it face up so that you can see and place your pattern pieces. I like to do it face up because I like to see, especially with leather, if there's any imperfections in the leather, I like to be able to see where those are so I don't accidentally get things in it. Also, you can kind of see there are some creases in my pleather because this arrived to me folded, which, I mean, it came from the UK, so, I mean, it had to be folded. So there's just a few areas that I probably just want to cut around. Not a big deal, but, and honestly, with a little heat, you know, hovering of a steam iron or something, those creases probably would come completely out. But anyway, I cut things out single layer when it comes to pleather. Number one, it would be impossible to fold this and get an accurate cut. It's just too bulky. So I have already cut out this, what is this? The side back here. By just laying my pattern piece down, cutting and marking my notches with just clipping into them with scissors. So then I'm just going to flip my pattern piece over and do the same thing. Now, I am doing this on a cutting mat with a rotary blade. This is not a new rotary blade. This is probably, I mean, it's not dull, but it's probably getting close to needing to be replaced. I cut out my pleather pants that you saw, my Persephone's with this blade, so I know it has to be on its way out. So I'm going to go ahead and use it for this as well. Once I have finished this project, though, it will need a new blade for the next project because this will significantly dull it, but that's okay. Is it dulling my scissors when I clip into it? Probably. But just get your scissors regularly sharpened. Find an area place. A lot of times places that do knives and stuff like that will also do scissors. Okay, so that's basically what I do. I just, cut it out, flip it over, cut out the next piece. Now, I also want to point out, leather definitely doesn't have a grain line. You can lay the pieces however you want, completely ignore that grain line. There's no grain line to leather. The same can be said for pleather. Now, there is like a fabric kind of backing on this, but here, let me just kind of flip it over. But if you look, it is almost like there's not a grain to it. It's not a woven fabric, really. Although I guess this is in between the layers, which would be a woven. So I treat pleather like I would with a grain line. But you can kind of fudge it a little bit more because just the nature of the it's plastic basically. So just keep that in mind as well. So you have more leeway. You can kind of fudge the grain line a little bit more with pleather. And then again with leather, you can just stuff things wherever they'll fit because there's no right or wrong. So I'm just laying out my pattern pieces. I had to do a full bust adjustment on this. Not even sure if you can see up there. Yeah, you can a little bit. I'm going to follow with that grain line. So I'm definitely eyeballing the grain line here. But I want to talk about some of these pieces that have, that are supposed to be cut on the fold. I'm just going to toss that up there for right now. So this is the center back right here. And this needs to be cut out on the fold. You can copy this off to cut the, and do one big piece that is obviously not on the fold. But a little trick that I like to do, and I'll be doing this, let's see, I've got this center back piece, I have a collar, the upper collar piece, and then also the yoke that are all getting cut on the fold. But what I like to do is I lay my piece down. Now you have to be very cognizant of what you're doing here because I've totally cut this line before, just not even thinking. But I'm gonna cut just a little bit past the 3 sides. And then I'm going to go ahead and carefully clip my notches. There's just that one there. But now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clip right there at that line. I would, if this were on the fold, I would clip this line anyway because I like to clip my center back, center front, whatever the piece is every time anyway. And then we're just going to flip it over. And you're just going to line that back up to those little clips that you made. I'm sure you guys cannot see that at all. I'm having a hard time. To make sure everything... Now, if this were a lighter weight fabric, you could actually just take this... Oops, I didn't cut that all the way through. And fold it over on itself to cut it out, but this is so bulky that would not work. So now I can just continue on. And this gets one fabric cut on the fold and one lining cut on the fold. And there you have it. And there is that piece all ready to go. So there's that piece. So yeah, I do that with all the pieces that are cut on the fold. And that's what I'll do. I'll just go around the rest of the yardage, keeping everything. Ideally, you don't have anything hanging off the table. Obviously, I don't know if you guys can tell, but this is hanging off the table on the far back side because it's pleather and it doesn't easily fold back up. Things buckle. So just make do the best you can. But that's how I'm cutting out my pleather. And again, rotary blade, self-healing cutting mat are going to be your best friends. I just use 2-inch washers that you can get from the hardware store for my pattern weights. you can use actually whatever you have nearby, but that is my preference. I just went and got a whole bunch of these 2-inch washers. So there you have it, guys. Okay, so there you have it. So that is what I did cutting out my pleather. Now, this jacket, this pleather is pretty heavy. And actually, when I was showing this, I think it was on Vlogmas, I was showing this fabric and someone had commented, they're like, I think that might be too heavy for a jacket. That might be better for bags. And they're probably, yeah, I think this would be great for bags. And yes, this probably is a little heavy for your typical coat. And halfway through making this, I honestly was like, have I made a horrible mistake? But then when I finished, I really like the exaggerated look. I think it is a very dramatic jacket, and it was not the look that I was necessarily had envisioned in my head when I started the project, but then when it was finished, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so dramatic. Like, this would be so great at like an art opening, or obviously all these things that will be happening once people are like vaccinated and we can somewhat go back to normal. Or like a concert, or you know, something like that, that would just be really, really cool. I'll put pictures of me in it right now. It just, yeah, so it did not turn out how I had envisioned, and it's pretty heavy, but oh my gosh, I really do love the finished jacket. It's been posted on the Minerva website, or the Minerva website, and I've gotten a lot of really good compliments on it. But yeah, the pattern is really great, and it's actually much simpler than you would anticipate, especially for a moto jacket. There's no pockets on this pattern. I did do a full bust adjustment on it, and there is a princess seam, so that, you know, I just did a full bust princess seam adjustment on that. I used so this is a spice orange color, and I think this color, I ordered like 3 different zippers from WAWAK, and this one was fiery red, I think. And I decided, I mean, they're obviously not a direct match, but I thought that looked the best with everything, and I liked the gold teeth. Another thing with sewing with pleather, since you can't press anything, but you want, especially on something like this, you want your seams to stay open. I top stitched on either side of every single seam except for the shoulder. Yeah, every single seam gets 2 lines of top stitching, and except for the underarm seam, because I just couldn't get that through the machine to top stitch. So I just kind of pushed that down with my hands as best as I could. But yes, even in the back, every single seam gets stitched down on either side to keep everything nice and flat. Obviously the jacket got top stitched all the way around, and my sleeves got top stitched, and the hem. So with the hem, the pattern, it's lined, the jacket's lined, and I used one of my silk scarves for the lining. Isn't that pretty? But then the bottom part of this peplum also has lining. But I was worried that, because that's how it hems, you know, you're sewing it together at the bottom and then it gets turned right side out, and then that's how the hem. I was worried that because this pleather is so stiff, that something that wasn't as stiff, it would not turn there at the hem. You know, the lining would just be constantly poking out, basically, because the pleather would win. Even with top stitching, like I was just worried about that happening. So I used the same fabric, which is why this used more fabric than it should have, for the peplum on the inside as well, and that really gives it the exaggerated peplum look, because there's 2 layers of this pleather going on back there. And the same, I mean, obviously there's 2 layers of the pleather in the collar and stuff as well. What else? I did not use any interfacing, none, because this was so stiff, and I'm glad I didn't. And actually, the more I like play around with this, the softer it is getting. But yeah, I didn't use any interfacing. Yeah, I used the silk for the lining. I didn't have enough, the scarf didn't have enough for the sleeves, so I had to use, it's the same lining I used for my orange cocoon coat, my bamboo coat, the waffle pattern bamboo coat. So I had just enough left for the sleeves on that. The lining got bagged, so it's pretty easy to do, and yeah, it sewed up pretty quickly. Now, this was a beast to get through my sewing machine because the fabric's so thick, but I'm really just, yeah, it did not turn out the way I thought it would, and I definitely had my doubts going for a little bit, but now that it's done, I really think that it is, I mean, it's a statement jacket. It is, I mean, it's bright orange pleather. Of course, it was always going to be a statement jacket, but I really think that it turned out really great, and like something I maybe wouldn't have made before, but I'm so glad I have it. Like, this is gonna be almost like a special occasion thing, I think. So yeah, that is my bold orange pleather jacket. I love it. I really do love it. So there you have it. I will have links to the pattern and the fabric down below. I do have an affiliate link with Minerva, so I do have an affiliate link for that fabric. But yeah, I mean, give it a try. Give pleather a try. If it scares you, if you want to start off with like a small bag or something, or a pouch, just to kind of get used to sewing with the material. But it really isn't much different. Oh, another thing, the thicker, and this isn't necessarily for pleather or leather, but the thicker your fabrics, the longer your stitch length needs to be, because the thread has to travel through the layers. It connects up with the bobbin when it pulls through. So the longer your stitch length, the more you have available to do that. So I sewed this at a 3.0 millimeter stitch length. I typically sew things at like a 2.5, but yeah, I sewed this whole thing at a 3.0. So, and that seems to be just fine. So just as a little heads up, my lining I sewed at a 2.5, but the rest of the jacket I did sew at a 3.0 because it was so thick. And my machine did fine with it. I mean, I didn't have any issues getting any areas through the machine, so that's good. It was just like a lot of like, and it was stiff, and it kept like, if I had anything, because sometimes I'll have things like sitting on my table, like my seam ripper will be sitting over here, or my pens or whatever, and I kept like sending things flying on the table because I'd be flipping the jacket around and it'd send things flying. But yeah, again, I'm just really happy with my finished jacket. So there you have it. I hope that gives you all some courage to sew with some pleather or leather. If not now, maybe as the weather starts to cool if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. Okay guys, that's all I have for today. I will see you again next week for our next sew along. Bye.